Welcome to Icon Gallery, our first event in the gallery since we were locked down for the second time. And it's a huge privilege for me, incidentally the director of Icon Gallery, Jonathan Watkins, to introduce you to artist, comedian, gardener, fighter for human rights, Joe Lycett.
Thank you. Yes. I'm not sure I'd go as far as saying a fighter of human rights, just sort of consumer rights. Humans, I'm less interested in, just the consumer element of it.
And Joe, how has the lockdown been for you? Because I understand that gardening may not have been something that you referred to sort of previously as an occupation, but I think you've been getting into gardening.
Yeah, well, gardening has sort of been my saviour, really, in the last 18 months, because that's basically all I've done. I've done bits and bobs. I managed to film a series of Sewing Bee, and which we did very carefully, and amazingly, nobody got anything, and we were all very safe. But beyond that, it's been, there's not been any stand-up to do. I've not been able to perform to audiences. So I've been writing, I've been filming little bits and bobs, little sketches and things. But beyond that, my kind of normal life is sort of completely different. And I've been doing a lot of gardening with mixed results.
Mm-hmm.
I get quite angry in the garden. I don't see it as the sort of idyllic place that lots of people will present it as. Most plants are thugs. They're clambering for light. They're pushing other things out of the way. They're killing one another, essentially. It's a war zone out there. And if the things that I like are being suffocated by the things I don't like, which often happens with me because I don't know what I'm doing, I get very cross.
Yeah, and cross with a spade or a fork or?
With words. So I post a lot on my social media quite aggressively about the plants in my garden, and I use words that my mother sometimes worries about.
Thank you. And it's kind of a sort of anti-Prince Charles sort of strategy.
Yeah, that has been my life strategy, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Now, we gave you something to do during your lonely lockdown days, which was to choose your 8 favourite works of art.
Yeah.
Or, works of art that were kind of occurring to you.
Yeah.
And it would be interesting to know how you approached it. I mean, some people go back into their childhood, the first painting that they saw, or what was the poster on their bedroom wall.
Yeah.
I mean, how did you choose these 8 favourite things?
Well, the thing with it is I thought I could be very... I could overthink it a lot, and I could sort of try and be intellectual about it and sort of go back into all of the sort of classic arts and then try and find a more obscure one by, I can't think of any artist now, Da Vinci or someone like that. Well, actually, I really like that little drawing he did. But it would all be total nonsense. Art for me is I generally like contemporary stuff. I like what's being done in Birmingham. I like stuff that is funny and is sort of a bit disconcerting and mad. And so I just thought about the art that's brought me pleasure in the last few years, and kind of went through Instagram. A lot of it was sort of going like, who do I really enjoy engaging with on Instagram, and who are the artists that who consistently sort of make me laugh. And so that was sort of how I ended up choosing them.
Yeah, there's a strong Birmingham emphasis in your selection, which is great, particularly given the fact that we're opening an exhibition shortly that features the work of 250 local artists, and including you.
Yeah, which I'm thrilled about, because I don't think I've exhibited anything in Birmingham up until this point. So I think it's the first thing I've ever had on a Birmingham art gallery wall, so thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a privilege and a pleasure.
Thanks.
But we say Birmingham artist, but the first one in your selection is an artist who's alive and well, living in Barcelona.
Yeah.
His name is Joan Cornella.
Yes.
We're all going to die. I thought this was a very, actually it's quite interesting. There is an existentialist thread that runs through your selection, I've noticed. And what was it that made this, number one in your list?
Well, I see it every day because I've got a print of it, and it's above the toilet in my ensuite in my house, and I've got it framed in a wooden frame, very simple wooden frame, and it never brings me anything but joy, even though the central message of it is arguably quite dark. But I think it's sort of for me, Juan Cornella's stuff. This is quite tame in comparison to a lot of what Juan does. But there's just something that, literally just from an aesthetic point of view, I love bold block colours, and Juan does that really brilliantly. I love sort of the kind of way that animation is put together, so like your Simpsons or your Family Guys, those sort of things. I love sort of thick lines that are done very sort of deliberately, and Juan does that really brilliantly.
When did you first see his work?
Oh, years ago. And immediately found it so funny. Because what he often does is he'll do those sort of kind of 6-frame sort of kind of cartoons, essentially, which tell a really dark story, and there's always a strange logic to what's going on in them. But there's something about, there's another piece of artwork I've got in my house, which isn't part of this, which is by an artist called Scotty, who's more of a performance artist, and he's drawn over a painting, an oil painting he found in a charity shop with "You Will Die." And I think, I hadn't thought about the existential thing, but I think a lot of what brings me sort of solace actually in life is I put a lot of pressure on myself to kind of make good stuff, and I was sort of really kind of obsessed over the work that I'm doing. And actually it's good to be reminded that it's all worthless and doesn't matter, essentially. And so I think having things like that around, and having a little bear that's waving at you going, "We're all going to die, it doesn't matter," is quite useful for me, actually, and doesn't fill me with kind of dread or like, "Oh God, I'm going to die." It fills me with like, "Oh yeah, I shouldn't take any of this seriously at all."
But, well, that was the thing I was going to say. The idea of comedy is a kind of Trojan horse to sort of convey something, that could be very sad, tragic, or, philosophically very profound.
Yeah. Well, comedy is very versatile at that. When used properly, it can absolutely make you, it can be very, very powerful. And yeah, I find it funny, essentially. That's why I chose it.
Yeah, I looked at a lot of his stuff online after seeing this, and this is this kind of nihilistic, idea of point, in fact, pointlessness. He's got one work where he says, "My life is pointless."
Yeah,
like
yeah.
That, And
there's a lot of the sort of messages in his work are kind of quite anti-capitalist, and that's something that I have sympathies for. I can't propose anything better than capitalism, so I wouldn't go so far as to say I'm anti it, but I definitely find it sort of appeals to the greedier side of our species, and a lot of his stuff is to do with that sort of the greed and the selfishness of his characters within his work, and how kind of silly that makes them, essentially.
That brings us very nicely onto the next slide, which is the Focke-Wulf image. And, this is, it's quite interesting because, you are choosing an image like the one we saw before, which has got this kind of philosophical depth, with a light touch. And then you've got this kind of more issue-based work, and it gets more overtly political, because there is that side to your work as well. And I was thinking, somebody referred to him as sort of Banksy of Birmingham, because he's kind of taking up these causes. And but then to some extent, he is a bit like, Focke-Wulf has got your back, sort of. He's kind of upset about some institution or, the way the world works. Particularly if here is a company running, prisons that arguably should be run by the government, and who's making money out of them, and and he's really kind of funny with it.
Yeah, well. That's it. It's something that I also get sort of cross about, is this sort of I suppose privatization of these things that maybe not necessarily should be privatized. But a company like G4S is such a sort of what G4S as a name is so vague. What is it? What does that mean? You have no idea what that stands for. What is its ethics? There's nothing clear about it, other than its work. And then when you look at its work, you go, oh, it's just like this sort of like services that most people wouldn't want to do, that they are quite happy to just, cream off some cash.
It's got that kind of MI5 feel, isn't it?
Yeah,
G4S,
it does,
MI. I work for
yeah.
G4S.
Yeah, horrible logo, everything about it sort of grim. And so he obviously feels the same way. And I'm laughing looking at it, because it's these like swirling faces of sort of the people working there who are all just, and that is exactly how I imagine them, and all of, I could have picked anything from Focke-Wulf, because I think he's so funny, and so I very rarely disagree with what he's going for. And I don't think I ever disagree, but sometimes I kind of think, I'm not as angry about that as you are. But I just find, this list of what they need is a qualified creche guard and then soft play riot police. I mean, he's had so much fun putting that together, but actually it's making a really good point, and he's putting it on these things where, it's essentially illegal, it's vandalism. I love it. I think it's.
He's based in Birmingham. Do you know him?
I do know him.
But you can't reveal his identity.
I can't reveal his identity. But it is the mayor, Andy. No, it's. What a twist that would be.
Yes.
And he's a very, very funny and quite sort of normal, Birmingham man.
That idea of the alias crops up a lot. In fact, it's interesting when I think about it, this selection of work, because you've got 3 artists here. In fact, we don't know their names.
Oh, yeah.
Or they go by another name. They go by, the pseudonym, which is something that you're quite keen on. I mean, you like the idea of the mask.
Yeah.
Assuming another identity.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned MI5, because I think my love of that came from the show Spooks, which I obsessed over when I was a kid, and I always wanted to be in Spooks. I just thought that would be like the pinnacle. And I loved all those, people coming up with aliases and having fake accounts and burner phones and all of these things. Love all that, and how you can sort of like kind of weed yourself around things. And so, it is something that appeals. And I do a lot in my work as, I suppose, as a serial troller. I maintain all sorts of accounts for people that don't exist, and often end up having arguments with myself on Twitter between different accounts to kind of generate some sort of buzz about something if I want to. So I very much respect and admire Focke-Wulf for not revealing his true identity.
But you have these aliases, but we do know that you are really Joe Lycett.
Currently, yeah.
Joe Harry Lycett.
Joe Harry Lycett, yeah.
Yeah, of course, because you were Hugo Boss.
I was Hugo Boss
for a little while. Yeah, and then you came back to being Joe Lycett.
Yeah.
But can we talk more about you and Birmingham and your relationship to Birmingham? Because it's an important thing, and you are. I mean, you were born, brought up here, spent some time away, then chose to come back, where many people might have imagined you'd sort of opt for some world city situation, or. And you're very much a champion of the city. I mean, you're funny about Birmingham.
Yeah.
In fact, you're funny about Birmingham to the point where you kind of do Birmingham accents or whatnot. And I mean, it's a kind of but it's a kind of humour based on a profound love of the place, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think that's precisely the reason why I sort of love it. Is that it's sort of, and why I stay here is that it's not pompous or kind of it doesn't regard itself too well in the way that these other cities do. And I love going to Manchester. Studied there. I was there for 4 years, and I love going to places like Liverpool and a lot of those northern cities. But they do really think they're brilliant, and I just think a level of sort of self-flagellation, both personal and as a city or as a country, is really important, and really, I really respect that. So, I definitely have very few ambitions to go to America for that reason, because it's an entire country that just thinks it's fantastic and there's nothing wrong. And I think that Birmingham is, beautifully a dump. There's lots wrong with it. It's not aesthetically, classically pleasing. There's all sorts of social issues here. But that's sort of what's exciting about it, and what sort of, there's something to do, It's not perfect.
Another one from Birmingham is the next one on our list, and that's Tat Vision.
Yeah.
You know, Birmingham, Birmingham born and raised probably. I don't know enough about him personally.
Yeah.
But very active in the city, loves charity shops.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of where it came from. He has this YouTube series called Tat Vision, and he became known as Tat Vision, and it's him going around charity shops. I was fortunate enough to be in one of them, where I found a lampshade, which he turned into a sort of a kind of massive monster that then I had to fight back in the video, and it was trying to take over Birmingham, and I got into a thing with Tat, and we were taking it on. But he's so, what I love about all of his papier-mâché heads, and he does loads of them, is that they are sort of a bit like Focke-Wulf's swirling head of the last one. They're these really kind of bastardized versions of popular culture figures or political figures. He's done Dominic Cummings, people like that. But they're all really accurate, weirdly. Like, that is totally Anton Deck to me. And yet, obviously, they're not Siamese twins joined at the brain. They're not actually like that. But there's something really vivid and really recognizable in them. Again, very funny. He really, takes his work seriously and doesn't at the same time in a way that I find really charming and impressive. And I just love his. I love all of his stuff, really. He does felt tip drawings that are really excellent as well. At Christmas, you could buy a bauble off him that he would put your face or a friend's face onto, and it inevitably didn't quite look like them because he'd just got a small grainy photo that he tried to make onto a bauble. I think
I think stylistically he's the closest in this selection to your style.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, these sort of strange versions of what people sort of look like, but not quite. Yeah, my Carl Chin is probably, if he'd made a Carl Chin head, it probably would look like my painting of Carl Chin.
Yeah, because we have a portrait of Carl Chin, who is a local historian, by Joe, in our show.
Yes, yeah.
But then I saw a clip of you with Jonathan Ross, and he went on to the show, and you actually brought him a portrait of him.
Yeah.
And he was kind of horrified by it. He said, well, oh my God, the reason I hate it is because it looks so much like me.
Yeah.
And then you insisted that he keep it on the set.
Yeah, which he didn't.
Did he not?
I went and hung it up on the set somewhere, and then I watched the show the next week to see if it was there, and it wasn't. And he's never spoken to me about it again. I don't know where it's gone.
Oh, shame.
It's probably in a bin somewhere, isn't it? I mean, Jonathan Ross has probably got all sorts of. I mean, I know I've been to his house, and it's full of junk. The guy needs to have a clear out.
But the fact that he's taking, as you often do, as his subject, people who are well known.
Yeah.
As celebrities. I'm a celebrity. Get me out of here. Which is maybe something every now and then you feel you can identify with.
Yeah. Well, I'm never eating bugs in a jungle, but yeah.
And his portraits very often. I mean, of course, I know. I mean, you illustrate, for example, your book with all kinds of things like animals and whatnot.
Yeah.
But very often, your paintings are portraits of people.
Yeah, I really like portrait, and that's sort of what got me into painting again. Well, it started with sculpture, actually. I saw a sculpture on an album cover, which I loved, and actually was so impressed with it as a sculptor. I thought, how have they created that? I've since met somebody knew somebody who made the album cover, and it wasn't a sculpture at all. It was like a cast of someone's face that they then just. And I was like, oh, that's cheating. But it's a beautiful thing. And so I was like, I want to learn how to do that. And then very quickly realized that it would take years of focus and doing nothing else to get good at making likenesses and sculpture. And so just decided on, actually, I'm just going to do whatever comes to me and still get a lot out of that, really. But yeah, faces and whatever, I think they do a lot when you see them in a good piece of artwork. I mean, that is just joy to me to see that. Particularly Ant's face is, and the fact that he's this tiny little baby essentially attached to Deck's head I mean, yeah. The mind that produces that is a mind I want to, interact with on a regular basis.
Now, on the sort of local connection, I was almost about to introduce the next artist as another Birmingham artist, but he's not. He's actually a black country artist. And this is something.
Yes.
This is not him. This is his muse.
Yes.
This is Dion Kitson,
Yeah.
who hails from Dudley.
He does, yes. What I love about this is, so this is it isn't entirely his painting. This is, I think, one he found in a charity shop, which was a far more kind of classic, I don't know what era you would describe it as,
It looks kind of, I don't know, late 19th, early 20th century, very academic style.
Yes, yeah. Oil painting, and he's done this with a few different oil paintings where he sort of modernized them, but modernized them in a very working class, very his work often comes, when you buy something from Dion, it comes with a certificate that it's from the council estate of Dion Kitson. It's there's all sorts of little like flourishes like that, which are really, really lovely. And yeah, so he sort of turns these sort of classic kind of oil paintings into figures that are, I suppose, more recognizable to us today. But I think she's so beautiful, and I think there's a tenderness to the way he's done it. Obviously, the original painting was very tender, but he could have been a lot more sort of kind of base, I suppose, about how he approached this. But there's a lot of Dion obviously comes from a working class background, and there's a lot of love for that in his work, and a lot of not wanting to escape it necessarily, but wanting to kind of champion it. And I think that's really brilliant and really beautiful, because a lot of the time the rhetoric of working class culture is that it's escape it and it's all horrible, and actually Dion's not saying that. He's saying like there's a lot of value here and there's a lot of beauty in it, and there's not many people that I'm aware of doing that. There's not a lot of that going on, and yet he takes it not that seriously and finds it quite funny when he shows me stuff that he's done. I always find it, he thinks it's sort of funny that he's put a £1 coin on a thing or whatever.
Yeah, no, that thing about class is really interesting. In the art world, of course, presumed to be that, we're dealing with luxury items, and this is a kind of middle class, upper middle class pastime.
Yeah. Well, it often is.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
So I was going to say, because you are interesting about class. You often talk about being middle class or lampooning the middle class and the pretensions and the aspirations of the middle class.
Yeah.
That's a very
I'm essentially attacking myself, really, because I sort of see my own ludicrousness, I suppose, and that for me is sort of standard fare, fish in a barrel sort of material, because it's my life. I can observe what I do in my life, and I can very easily kind of pick that apart.
Now, the next image is not a Birmingham artist, an American artist, Edward Hopper. Now, I think we're sort of getting back into the existential groove.
Right.
Here.
Well, this is, maybe, yeah. I'd love to know why you say that, because literally this pleases me because of Edward Hopper is so good at shadow, and I love this time of day. I actually didn't know it was called morning sun for a long time, and I thought it was an afternoon light. And it sort of, to me, it felt like, I think maybe because the bed is made, so it sort of felt like she hadn't just woken up. It felt like she was just sort of, end of the day, just sitting on the end of the bed, or whatever. Maybe she just had a nap. But I love that light, and I love that, the expression, and it just makes me feel calm looking at that. And a lot of Hopper's stuff does that, but there's often more, kind of sadness isn't the word, because she obviously doesn't seem like thrilled, but she seems more sort of contemplative than sad, I would say, whereas often it's more stark how sad his subjects are. I just find that very soothing and pleasing.
It's the loneliness or the solitariness of that figure, I think, that probably made me refer to this as more existentialist.
Yeah.
The drama of one person alone in a room. They have nothing else to refer to but their own thoughts.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, yeah, she's looking out the window at who knows what. I mean, I don't necessarily see it as that. I mean, it's almost sort of quite industrially outside, actually, or whatever that scene. There's a water tower and whatever.
Yeah.
But no, I don't. It doesn't make me sad that in any way, and I don't feel sad for her. I just feel reassured by it. I really love it.
This is in complete contradistinction to your next choice.
Yeah.
Mr. Bingo.
Yeah.
Not his real name.
Not his real name.
And there are two works here. They're complementary works. I've seen, actually, I went onto the website. There are a lot of cock plants, lots and lots.
Well, so he will he'll draw any old cock. If you send him a picture of your cock, he'll draw it for a fee. So the reason there's loads of them is because they're all people's knobs that they've sent in.
I see. So more men want him to.
Well, actually, I asked him about this, and he said that started with the cock plant, and then women started to complain, like, why can't I have my vulva painted? So, or drawn, sorry. And so that's when he started doing the vulvas, and I think the vulvas are now more popular. I think I might have made that up, but. It's really like at first you don't spot it. You don't it just looks like, oh, what a lovely, and then suddenly, and I think that, I mean, it's the puerile side of me that finds that really funny. But then seconds later, you're sort of finding these things very beautiful again. And
he's a very good drawer.
He's an amazing
really
drawer.
Good drawer.
He's a very skilled illustrator. But always kind of using it in a way that's quite challenging and that pisses off the right people. He did a tea towel that was loads of drawings of old people, and it had above it people that voted for Brexit who are now dead. And Nigel Farage discovered it somehow and tweeted about it, being furious that this thing existed. And obviously Bingo's sales went through the roof. He sold loads more. He's thrilled about it. And he often does things like that, which are kind of slightly combative. But he's not that political. I mean, Brexit is probably the most political he ever gets. It's often more just sort of, in the same way as like Juan Cornella does, it's sort of often sort of needlessly just aggressive for the sake of it, because it's funny.
Because this series of work called Hate Mail, where he just sends insults on postcards to people he doesn't know.
And they were really popular. Of course they would be.
People were paying him to insult them.
Often though, that's what stand-up is. People, particularly, you get a front row of people, they are delighted if you speak to them and tell them their dress is shit. They love it. There's something about that sort of feeling that you can suddenly, in those spaces, you can say what you kind of always wanted to say, or just sort of be honest. And honesty is, I discovered that particularly with dealing with hecklers or audience members in stand-up quite early on, that the funniest thing you can say is the first thing that comes to your mind. If you start to overthink it, that's when it starts to lose. You try and overthink it, whatever, it's gone. But if you just think that their dress looks shit and you just say it, it's often really funny, because it's the only space you can do that, I suppose. And then suddenly, often, if I've done something like that, then my next thought will be to apologise for saying that thing. And then that's funny, because you're sort of, the honesty of the trying to pull it back is that. And so, there's something about all of this work, which is to do with, a lot of it's to do with the honesty of, this is how I view Anton Dec, I suppose, or this is how I think of G4S, whatever. It's like an honest portrayal of the real world.
Well, I saw a film that he made, and it was a documentary about him making the advent calendars and putting all these naked people into a pub and then dressing them up, and then every day you using one of those that kind of paint that you can take away with a coin or something, and then you reveal their nakedness underneath.
Yeah,
and he's such a sweet guy. What I found, it conforms to what experience has taught me, that very often those artists that make the most transgressive work are the most gentle people.
Yeah.
Underneath it all, they're the kind of sweetest people. I can think of a number of people at Icon that we've worked with, and you think, oh God, that person, their work is so kind of edgy that when I meet them, I'm probably not really going to enjoy their company. And they turn out to be, so demure and so grateful that you're paying attention to them.
Well, I think often those people, that this is their outlet. They can't, like we all have kind of thoughts that are aggressive and combative and all of those things, and not everyone has uses language to get it out. It's other ways of doing it. So.
Now, somebody who has shown at the Royal Academy is next on your list, but I say that because you have also shown at the Royal Academy.
I have, yes.
And you put a huge price tag on your work. It was like £20 million or something?
12.5 million.
Only 12.5.
I did a flash sale, actually, because it's still available to buy on my website. I did a flash sale down to £1 million, which is a massive reduction.
Is this the little sculptural portrait of a guy called Steve? Chris.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of self-portrait, but I did it very drunk, and it doesn't look anything like any living human, I'm fairly sure, or dead human. That got into the Royal Academy summer exhibition.
Which I saw, which was Grayson Perry's
year. And I was in Humphrey Ocean's room, and he put this sculpture in the corner of the room on the floor, which made me laugh so much. I thought that was the perfect place to put it, because every other sculpture was on a plinth, and then there was mine just sat in the corner where you could have kicked it over.
Yeah, but he would get, Humphrey Ocean knew Ian Drury, of the Blockheads. He really gets the...
I really liked him. I only met him briefly. I really liked him. I thought he was really...
Yeah.
But so I didn't actually know this was in the Royal Academy.
Claire Douglas.
Yeah, I came to her through, I think she was recommended to me on Instagram, I think. And she is, I'm fairly sure Birmingham based, and is constructing a painting not dissimilar to this, but about Birmingham. It's got all the landmarks of Birmingham. But she seems to kind of paint the scene and then add to it with all of these figures. And I just love the style of it. For a starter, I just think her I suppose they are portraits of individuals, are just really pleasing to me. Just so, I love the use of colour and shade and all of that. They're very vibrant. I'm guessing it's acrylic. Love all this. And then there's lots of popular culture figures in there. There's a Queen up there, and there's Big Bird. I think that is Grayson Perry on the bike, maybe, or someone Grayson Perry-esque. I think she's kind of amazing, and it's the patience as well of constructing something like this, because it takes a month, and I am very. So I've just spotted a guy being sort of ridden like in a sort of.
I was going to say a bit of S&M going.
A bit of S&M up there, yeah. So every time you look at it, you spot something else. I love it, and I have to admit that part of the reason I love it is I was a fan of hers before this happened, but in her Birmingham piece that she's working on at the minute, she has included me in it, which is one of those moments in my life where probably wouldn't, a lot of people wouldn't register it necessarily, but I was so amazed and so proud of the fact that I'd been considered part of this sort of the community and the culture.
Do you know what you're doing? Do you know what you're doing in the?
I'm carrying I'm in one of my ridiculous faux fur coats, carrying a bag of Tesco shopping. Perfect, and that is basically what I'm doing most of the time. Is wandering around in a faux fur with a plastic bag.
Now, the next work, and this is the last work, and this is work by Tom Levine, who you work with.
Yes.
And it's the only abstract work in the selection, and it's called Bastard. And immediately I think of your rendition of John Lennon's Imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine there are no bastards.
Yeah,
Above us only bastards.
Yeah.
And then somebody wrote something very funny about, speaking of class, and also Birmingham and accents, all that kind of jazz, somebody said, the funniest thing about this song, or this rendition of Imagine, is the way some people say bastards, the way some people say bastards.
Bastards, yeah. I'm a bit of a strange one for that because I don't really have a Birmingham accent. And this often gets picked up on when I do voiceover for Sewing Bee or something like that, where you have to do the kind of explanation bits. And I'll veer between Bath and Bath and all of those different, and there doesn't seem to be any consistency as to why. It's not necessarily words around it, just seems to be whatever mood I'm in. But generally bastard is a funnier way of saying it than bastard to me. There's an amazing video of Sean Bean, all of the times he said bastard in films next to each other. And he says it a lot, and I couldn't tell you why, because they clearly don't need to be used in a lot of the clips. But it's very, very funny. The word bastard to me is really funny. And I couldn't tell, I couldn't explain specifically why. More so than I think than any of the other swear words. Bitch I like as well. I think because they feel quite 80s. He's a bastard. Like there's a power to it. But I didn't actually know this was called Bastard before I saw it. And it's actually now in my house because I bought it off him. And it's huge. And it's very, very heavy. And it took him months to do because it's, he couldn't quite get the effect that he wanted right. So he had to keep doing it. And it's just, pounds and pounds of acrylic that he sort of rolled over it and then played with and then got it wrong. And he said the thing collapsed at one point under the weight of the paint, so he had to reinforce the whole thing. And I think that's why he's called it Bastard, because he hated
it's such a bastard.
It was a bastard to put together.
Yeah.
And but actually, it's one of my favourite things I own because it's depending on what time of the day it is, the light makes it, because there's so many layers of it and it's not flat in any way. The shadowing creates different things, but I just love all the colours in it, and I love the kind of effort in it. I love that it has taken him that long to get there. It's a sort of victory over being defeated by a painting. He's like, I'm going to keep going, and actually, I'm so glad he did because it's really, really beautiful. But Tom works on Got Your Back. He's a film director who's very accomplished, very talented, and has made series with that Rosie Jones, the other comic who's on my show. He's just done a whole series with her. But when he's not making films, he is incredibly prolific painter. And if you look at his Instagram, there's paintings going up most days of stuff that he's done. He is kind of obsessive about it. But it's all wonderful stuff, and really, you can tell that it's a real solace for him. But he often makes quite sort of lovely points in his stuff, and not hugely political. But yeah, I just love his work. And so
is it typical of him to be so non-figurative?
No, this is quite unusual. Well, I don't know. Actually, he has done a few like this, but I think that one sort of was pained him so much to put together that he didn't do a lot more of them. But often they're kind of slightly abstract, but not as abstract as that, I would say. He does a lot of kind of weird animals and things like that.
Okay.
Sort of strange shaped creatures. It brings me a lot of pleasure, that, and I again see it most days because it's kind of on a quite prominent wall in my house, so I see it. And as I say, depending on what time of day it is, it will look different and have a different effect. It sort of lives beyond his considerable work. Yeah.
One of the things that I think I like most about your work is that you don't. You have an idea. It's the kind of idea that I imagine I might have. At the end of a day and a glass of wine, you think. And it seemed like terribly funny at the time. But you wake up the next morning and think, no, I won't go through with that.
Yeah.
But there's so many of those kinds of thoughts that seem to be occurring to you that you do go through with, and you persevere with them and you push them to an extreme.
Yeah.
Somebody would have said, oh look, there are 1,000 ideas like that, and just let's consign that one, to the delete it, and put it to one side and sort of get on with. More serious things on my job. But your job is pursuing all those things.
Well, yeah, I sort of wish I did a bit more of that, where I just went, that's a funny idea, or that's a nice idea, leave it as an idea. Because I do get like, oh, actually, and then I start to really think it through, and then I actually can't sort of rest properly until it's realised and it's done. And I talk to Bingo quite a lot about this because he has this sort of, he's obviously generating a lot of ideas all the time, and he emails himself the ideas. And if he hasn't done anything with an idea for 2 weeks, he kind of parks it, he puts it to one side and kind of puts it in a book and probably doesn't do anything with it ever again. And he gives himself those 2 weeks to kind of get excited or let the excitement die. Whereas I don't do that. I just keep the idea in a to-do list, and the to-do list just keeps growing. So there's a million things I want to do, and I'll never finish basically, and they'll keep growing. And often they're sort of quite long scale, big ideas that, take ages to do. But until I've done it, I'm not, I can't properly chill out.
Well, I'm so glad that you did this.
Well,
I have to say.
So did I. I actually really, I found the process of picking them at first quite scary. And then, as I say, when I just sort of went, I'm just going to go for it and just choose stuff that has made me happy, it made me realise how much, how proud I am of the city and that I live in and was born in, and how excited I am by it. But also just about the kind of people around me. I mean, Tom's not from Birmingham. I actually don't know where Tom's from, but how much good stuff is being made right now, and how we should totally champion that. And that's why this Icon exhibition I'm thrilled to be part of, and is so important for the city. It's good.
Thanks. Well, now, normally at this point, we turn to the audience and say, you have a chance now to, I've been talking to Joe for the last, however long it's been, but now you have an opportunity to ask him some questions, but there isn't anybody here.
No. Well, they can tweet me.
You can tweet him.
Yeah, just send me a tweet. I might answer your question. Yeah.
It's been such a pleasure, Joe. Thanks.
A pleasure, thank you.
A million for coming.